Well, before I get to the address, there's some introduction I need to make about the Civil War. The polls tell me that high schoolers, and of course if you watch Waterworld, college students even worse, don't know anything about history. And so when we think of the Gettysburg Address, we have to realize what it was all about. We had in our country that epoch of slavery. So many of our forebears came from Europe. In England, at the time when the sun never set on the Union Jack, there was a great fight in the history or the places in Europe. There was a man named Wilberforce who headed up the fight against slavery in the Commonwealth. And so all this time in the public service, he was doing all he could, and finally, about the end of his life, the British Commonwealth voted to stop slavery in all of the Commonwealth. That happened about 1800. However, we were not so fortunate in the States. Our country was divided over. We had many protesters. We had underground railroads. We had people fighting in our government to keep America free from slavery, but the southern states were bound to it because of the cotton, the free labor. And so ended up, the southern states decided to be separate. They seceded. Abraham Lincoln was our president at that time in the 1860s. And he had been to Louisiana, down in Baton Rouge or somewhere in the early days, and he had been attended an auction on slavers, and he saw families ripped apart, and his heart broke for the slaves that were being treated like animals, like chattel. And so in his presidency, he determined to get rid of slavery, but the secession of the southern states caused a war. And the North against the South, it wasn't like an invasion. It was brother against brother, family against family, businessmen against businessmen, preachers against preachers. And that was the way the Civil War was fought. And to get to feel the pathos of Abraham Lincoln as he stood that day in 1865, about 3 months after the Battle of Gettysburg, I'm sure that he visualized that whole plain full of dead bodies, some in gray, some in blue uniforms. In giving this address to the country, I'm sure he didn't think it would last, and he says so in his speech, but it has become one of the hallmarks of our nation's history. And so, as a primary school, we memorized quite a few things, and one of that was the Gettysburg Address. I didn't know Abraham Lincoln, by the way. Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this nation, on this continent rather, a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this, but in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or to detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is rather for us, the living, to dedicate ourselves to the unfinished work that they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to dedicate ourselves to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave their last full measure of devotion. That this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, that this government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth. Thank you.